Hey, good evening, everybody. Give the room a minute here to populate before we get going. As always, if you are watching this through the Tour of Idaho Facebook page, best thing to do is to give StreamYard your credentials and your name will pop up if you ask a question. If you are streaming this through the YouTube platform or through the motorcyclejazz.com Facebook page, it might be best to put your name at the end of a comment so that I know who you are if you have a question to ask or a comment to make. Let's see. What do we got going on here? Yes. All right. I see the room starting to fill pretty quickly. We'll get rolling right at 7 o'clock, and there we go. 7 on the nose. So, the good news, hello, David. Hello, Jeff. All of the 2022 stuff is up. I got it all finished today. I went through and spent a couple days. I actually finished it yesterday, but I spent a day or so proofreading it. Hello, Jake. And it's good to go. There may be a few typos in there. I think in terms of the waypoints and the maps and everything and the written description, it should be good to go. As I mentioned on the post on the Tour of Idaho page where I talked about this earlier, I'll set up a place in the forum in the next couple of days when I get some time so that if you think there's a waypoint wrong or if you have a question, hello, Brian, I will. You can make a comment there, and I'll check that every few days to see what's up. That way I don't get these streams of information coming at me from all directions. For the first time this year, I kept track of how much time I put into this since the first of the year, and it's slightly under 100 hours, believe it or not. And that doesn't count any of the riding that I did last year to uncover these new trails. It's 100 hours. Try to remember that this year when you're fussing at me because I'm trying to figure out a way to get you the points that you need and say you got to ride up this trail, and then you PM me back and say, I don't want to ride up that trail. Hello, Jeff. Hello, Jim. Jim and Andrew Hickson, you got a shout on the route description page today. Thanks a lot for your help in planning one of the mystery days. And I'm looking forward to getting together with you guys here in another week or so that we can nail that all down. This year, by the way, I'm going to talk about the whole Jeff Jensen. Hello. I'm going to talk about the whole route and the challenge point aspect of it and everything in its own PBR Monday. We'll get to that after we've gone through the whole route. This year, there are enough bonus sections. There's one entire day, hello, Scott, where there's literally, I think there's 24 different routes that you can take on that day. And you don't need to do all of them to get the points you need for that day. Most of them are true bonus routes. So this year, if fire closes things down, I think I'm just going to tell you to stick to what we tell everybody in the route description page. Go right around the fire. Get back on the tour as quickly as you can. But I'm going to try to get myself out of the business of helping you with fire route arounds. Last 5 years, I've tried to do that as much as possible just because I feel bad that a lot of the people that come here don't know the area as well as I do. And so I'm trying to help you out. Well, this is probably the best way for you to get around that. But this year, if you make your own map set with Cal Topo or something else, which you should do. Hello, Scott. Hello, Jake. And hello, Brian. You bring a copy of the maps that I have. You go out and get yourself a copy of the official Forest Service and BLM maps. If you download that MVUM layer for your TrailTech Voyager Pro, or you just print that layer on the maps that you make in Cal Topo or something else, with all of the bonus sections and all of the purple routes that I have, which are circumstantial alternatives, you should be able to figure out a way to get around just about any fire. So I may give you some help this year, but for the most part, if fire pops up in front of you and that trail's closed, you run up on a sign, you're expected to get around the fire. Don't ride anything that's closed. Don't take any chances. Get around the fire and get back on the tour as quickly as you can. That's what it is. And those trails are you don't get an off-route penalty for not riding a closed trail. In fact, you may get DQ'd if you do ride a fire closed trail. And believe it or not, that's happened several times. But just get back on the tour as quickly as you can. There's no off-route penalty for missing those trails, but you do have to make them up, and that's why all these bonus sections are out there. There's probably 50 bonus sections this year, so there's plenty out there for you to ride, and they're on every day except the last day. So you should have plenty of opportunities to make up points that you missed by riding around a fire. Hello, Drew. So anyway, we'll get to more of that later. We'll drill down into the details of the challenge point aspect of it, the ancillary challenge points, which are people, sort of the finer points of the rules later. Let's just continue along the route. Now, again, it's all up. You can look at the maps. You can look at the waypoint files. You will notice that there is not a file for day 12, and there's not a map for day 12. That's because all of day 12 is a mystery day. You're going to start in either Superior or St. Regis, and you're going to have to Wallace, and we're not going to tell you before you get there what you're going to do to get from St. Regis to Wallace, but I can tell you this. I've ridden a lot of that stuff. I haven't ridden all of it, but I've ridden a lot of it, and you're going to love it. It's going to be one of everybody's favorite days, but it's going to be a booger. There's some stuff out there that will that'll keep you on your pegs. But anyway, last week we had Jimmy on, and I want to thank Jimmy again for taking an hour out of his life to be here. He's always a great guest. I have a ton of respect for the guy, and the coolest thing that ever happened was when he showed up and he wanted to make a movie of the Tour of Idaho. And there's links to it on our website. If you haven't seen it, you should. It really captures, I think, the essence of the tour. And last week you got a little, behind the scenes about it. It was tough. Jimmy wasn't always happy. He showed up insanely early that year to do it. We were the first guys out. In fact, he called me right as I was getting ready to leave to start sawing. That was back in the days when I used to go out first every year and saw as much of it as I could. And I was going to leave in a couple of days, and I get a call, and he says, I'm on my way. I got a cameraman, and we're going to make a movie. And the hook was that, oh, yeah, you'll like this guy. He's from Hillbillyville, where you are. Sure enough, he was born about 25 miles from where I was born, back in Kentucky. That was supposed to be the hook to get me to drop all my plans and go off with him on this crazy adventure, which turned out to be the most epic week I ever spent in my life. But it was hard. And, Jimmy told you last week it was hard for him, and the guy's one of the greatest motorcycle riders on the planet. And it's more than just a riding. It's all this other stuff that you have to be able to do. So, we want to prep you as much as possible, but in the end, all I can do is tell you this is what you're facing. It's up to you to wrap your mind around it, and some people are better at that than others. One last thing before I get into it today. My wife, when I told her, honey, I'm into this 100 hours, she looked at me and she goes, you're out of your mind. She goes, why did you spend 100 hours on this? Because you weren't riding your motorcycle. You spent that whole 100 hours sitting right where I'm sitting now, looking at these 3 screens I'm looking at. And so I took her into Facebook, and I went down through, a lot of you are friends of mine on Facebook. A lot of us are connected through social media and Instagram and Twitter. And I started taking her down through my Facebook feed, and I think Michael Knight had posted something, and Jeff Stoss had posted something, and all of you posted the stuff, and I started saying, now look at the people that liked and commented on this. In a lot of these posts, we go down, the first 10, 15, 20, something like that, and I go, half these people are from the Tour of Idaho. There's this great big community that kind of got built up around this thing, and these guys all support each other, guys and gals. Kerry Barton's one of us. They all get out, man, and they're friends on social media, and they pump each other up, and they like everybody's pictures and stuff like that. And I think that's fantastic. I think that you guys and gals are some of the coolest people I've met when it comes to stuff like that. You really support. Get this computer back on. You support each other, and I told her that's good enough for me, at least for another year. After next year, things are going to change. So let's get into the 45th parallel north. I think the last time I got you all the way into Salmon, is that correct? Not the last time, but the time before, I think we had gotten all the way to Salmon. And unless somebody tells me otherwise, I'm going to make that assumption, and we're going to start from there. Once you reach the 45th parallel this year, by the way, which is just south of Salmon, you're about halfway. So I think there's a little poetry in that. 45th parallel marks the halfway point of the Tour of Idaho, the way it's configured this year. So you have a half day off in Salmon. Once again, Les Schwab is no longer in the business of motorcycle tires, so you're going to have to do something else. As I told you last week, we have, hello, Jerry, we have somebody in Haley that's going to be able to hook you up, and there is a motorcycle shop, Wildside Power Sports, or Motorsports, excuse me, in Salmon, that'll hook you up, but it's just expensive. They're principally an ATV shop. They do sell motorcycles and motorcycle stuff there. I would suggest you call them in advance because the selection they're likely to just have isn't very good. So if you want tires in Salmon, I'd call those guys and have them order up whatever it is that you want. And it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get them, too. They're not cheap. Hey, Todd. So there you go. You got a half a day off in Salmon, which is plenty of time to get done what you need to do. It's the second biggest town along the tour. The grocery store there's great. There's a hospital there. Lots of restaurants. There's some nightclubs. The sickest I've ever been in my entire adult life. We played a gig at a place, hello Al, called the Owl Club, which is still there. And we played there back in my rock and roll days. And we drove all the way up from Pocatello, dead of winter, get there. I had a pizza about 90 minutes before the show, and I got food poisoning, and it just turned me inside out. And I remember having to go out in the alley in the back of the place and take care of myself. And we got through 2 sets, and I just said, I can't do it anymore. And I actually had to go to that hospital there. That's why I know all about the hospital. I spent a night in the hospital having my stomach pumped. Those were good times, what can I say? But anyway, it's a great little place, and they have just about everything you could ever want there. But you're not going to want to loiter too long because the day to get you out of, let's see what I call this. Yep, day 8. The day to get you out of Salmon and to North Fork has got some stuff on it that's not entirely fast. It's mostly transfer section, but it's not all transfer section. So the way we're going to do it is the way we've done it the last couple of years, except for last year. Fires closed a lot of that stuff down. We're going back to the 2020 route. So you're going to go up to Wallace Lake, right up there. There's a challenge point where you're looking down to Wallace Lake. Pretty cool. You're going to go right across the road, and there's an ATV trail, which is actually more single track than ATV trail. That'll take you around. You're going to loop back around to, what the heck's the name of that road? Let me get going here on my map. Stormy Peak Road. It'll loop you back around the Stormy Peak Road, and you'll eventually come around to something called the Moose Creek Trail. And Moose Creek, a bunch of guys rode last year. I haven't ever ridden Moose Creek. I'm going to go up sometime in the next few weeks and look at it. But people I know and trust rode it, and they said, yeah, it's a great trail. It's got a couple little swampy areas in it, but other than that, it's a fine trail. Then you're going to go down the road a bit. You're going to hit another single track, which is Hornet Creek. Now, I have ridden Hornet Creek, but it was about 10 years ago was the last time I did Hornet Creek. The time I did it was pretty late in the season. It was the end of September, and I had to saw a lot. So that's one that I don't know about. If you're one of the first teams in there, you get in there, and it looks like it hasn't been sawed. There's a road that you can take that'll go around that. You can just go back to the Moose Creek Road, and you'll lose. If it's because it hasn't been sawed, we can work that out. You know, you won't get credit for that trail, but I don't know if I would ding you an off-route penalty. We'll have to see how that goes. But anyway, you're going to end up down at Leesburg eventually. It's a little tricky finding your way into the town of Leesburg. You might want to study the aerial photos, look at the waypoints in the map, but eventually you're going to get down into Leesburg. And I put a challenge point. There's a big interpretive sign down there at Leesburg, and I put a challenge point right there this year. You should go to that sign and read about why that place is there, middle of nowhere. It's kind of cool. Then after that, it's pretty quick. You're going to go, if you're on a 3-person team, you got a little bit of work to do because I'm going to want you to ride a little bit more trail. But no matter what size team you're on, you're eventually going to wind your way down to Panther Creek. And then you're going to go down and hit the Salmon River Road, and you're going to ride it back to the east all the way to North Fork. It is about 50 miles of fairly monotonous droning down dirt roads. But On that Panther Creek Road, you need to pay attention to what it says in the write-up. That's the most dangerous part of the whole tour of Idaho. You should assume that around every corner coming at you is a Subaru in a full four-wheel drift with a bunch of hillbillies driving a car and goats tied to the roof. If you make that assumption, you might live through that section of road. But every time I used to do it at night all the time. The way the tour used to be configured, you could come through there at night if you wanted to. And I always rode that section at night, so at least I could kind of see the headlights coming up the creek. Be careful going through there. Also, make sure that you slow down in those residential areas. Nobody wants you blasting through there at 60 miles an hour in a motorcycle, especially when the speed limit is ostensibly 35 everywhere and 15 and 20 in a lot of those little residential areas. So just be aware of that. Now, if it were me, I plan on getting out of Salmon no later than 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you do that, you should be able to roll in to North Fork at a reasonable hour, 5, 6 o'clock at night, plenty of time. You want to get to North Fork kind of early because it's a nice place. They'll feed you. There's a really good pizzeria right up the road that I like a lot, and they'll tell you how to get there. Cass and her crew at the village at North Fork are just great people. They'll take real good care of you. It's a nice place. You can go sit by the river. The rooms that they have for you are very nice. So it's just a cool place to stay. You know, it's another one of these places that's sort of like Smoky Bar Store. It's a little bit iconic. And, you know, you walk in, you see all the Patagonia stuff laying around, and you think, well, they don't like us here. And they like you all a lot. Those people are, they ride motorcycles, they ride mountain bikes, they fish, they do all kinds of things. So you'll like it there. It's a pretty good little place. And you want to get to bed early. Let me open up the next one. Because the next day this year is going to be a doozy. I could not believe how long this was when I did the profile and came up with the distance. Day 9 this year is going to be a huckleberry. So you're going to start at North Fork, and you're going to do all the stuff that we did last year that's on the west side of 93, plus the stuff we did the year before that's on the east side of 93. I just arc welded those two segments together, and I put every single trail we've ever used on them. And it's awesome, but it's a lot farther than I thought it was going to be. So it's kind of a have the girls at North Fork make you a breakfast burrito. What was the name of that team, those two kids that came a couple of years ago? And they had the most awesome pictures. They called them sandwich pictures. So they had a really good picture at one of those lookouts with a North Fork burrito. Jeremy and, oh, God, senility's a terrible thing. I've forgotten the other young man's name. A couple of awesome kids, one of my favorite teams ever. Those guys had some fun. Buckeyes, there you go. Thank you, Jeff. The Buckeyes were one of the most awesome teams ever. Big smile on their face in every single selfie photo. Didn't take themselves too seriously. They were awesome dudes. And these guys were incredible riders, too. And they were, you know, pretty low-key, pretty humble about the whole thing. So you're going to get out of North Fork hopefully pretty early. Now, you're going back to North Fork that night. So the question arises, do I need to bring everything? I don't think you need to carry spare gas. Maybe a little, just in case you tipped your bike over. On most oversized tanks, you can probably make the loop that day. You need to take some water because it's hot. Or you need to take something to get water out of a creek and purify it, because that ends up being a big deal for a lot of people. I'd take the rescue kit. There is some side hilling. I don't know that I'd take a whole bunch of tools or things like that, you know, maybe something to fix a flat. But if the weather looks nice, I don't know that I would take all of my, spare gear and stuff like that. But my point is, you can lighten your bikes that day because you're coming back to the same place. And it's not against the rules to leave stuff in your room that you don't think you might need that day. So if it were me, I'd lighten it up and just treat it like a day trip. I have never ridden these trails, even late in the season, without doing some sawing. This area goes through a lot of forest. It's been severely damaged by beetles, and every time the wind blows, stuff falls down. So I definitely bring a saw. But a lot of the rest of the stuff you could probably leave behind and treat it like a day trip. So you're going to go up to Ulysses Lookout. You're going to go back down the Salmon River Road first thing in the morning, up to Ulysses. There's a challenge point up there. It's kind of cool. Then you're going to ride around and go up to Indian Peak. Then you hit the first single track of the day, which I refer to as day 9 is single track buffet. It's all over the place. It's one right after another. And the first one is called Butcher Knife Ridge, and Butcher Knife Ridge is one that you take your kid on their 50 on. It's an extremely simple trail, but it's beautiful, and you're just going to dig the heck out of it up there. The only unfortunate thing is you're going in the wrong direction. The really good views occur if you're coming back the other way, which you may be doing next year. Next year, I may just reverse this loop that you do this day. But it's a great trail. Takes you to the Continental Divide Trail. The Continental Divide Trail has got a little bit of side hilling. There's a cool monument out there, and there's a challenge point at that monument. It's really easy to miss where you start heading down to the Axe Park Trail because the trail is not well marked. At least it wasn't the last time I was up there, and I was up there last summer. But there's a trail that goes downhill to your right, and I tried to put a waypoint right where it is. But there's another trail that continues to go straight ahead and stay up high. The one that goes down to the right starts to go off the ridge. If you take the one that stays high, it eventually just peters out in a bunch of brush. The one you want's the one that actually goes downhill. And if you miss it, the trail that you're on peters out in about a quarter of a mile, so you won't go too far. But you go down to Axe Park, and there's a non-motorized trail there, which fools a lot of people. I talked about that in the write-up. Don't do that. The trail you want, again, there's a waypoint there, and it's back up over your left shoulder, and it's really steeply up this hill, too. You look up there, and you'll go, I got to go up there? And yeah, you do. Takes you right back up to the Continental Divide. You kind of come down off the divide a little bit and go down through these meadows. Then you head back up to the divide. On the regular tour route that day, if you exclude the challenge sections and some of the bonuses, the only really gnarly place in the entire day, at least to my thinking, is there's one really high-energy switchback up there just before you get back up with the Continental Divide. It's in this kind of bumpy section, and it's a tight switchback, and where everybody spun their tire, it's a little bit rutted. So for me, that's a get off, lift the bike around so that I could redirect it and then just gun it and get up the hill. Or, as Jimmy would say, exercise appropriate traction control and get up the hill. So you're going to get up on the Continental Divide. You come around and you get up above Allen Lake, and it's just really beautiful up there. I mean, there's just these incredible views. You can look down to Allen Lake, and you got a choice up there. You can come down you can come down Axe Park. That's the regular part of the route. Or you can go down, if you want to treat it as a bonus section, you can go down Ditch Creek. Now, if you go up Ditch Creek, that's the challenge section for the day. But if you go down Ditch Creek, it's not nearly as hard. That's just considered a bonus trail. So if you wanted to get one bonus point, instead of going down Axe Park, I would go down Ditch Creek. That's not the bonus that I would particularly get. The Axe Park Trail is kind of cool, and I think most of you will like that a lot better than riding down Ditch Creek. But if you decided you need a bonus, we gave you one right there. Either way, you go down, and you're going to end up at a place called Ulysses Lookout. And Ulysses Lookout is a challenge point. Then you're going to head up to something called Twin Creek Ridge. It's another single track. There's a really long road that takes you up there after Ulysses. Not Ulysses, Granite Mountain. I'm very sorry, Granite Mountain. So it's the Granite Mountain Lookout where the challenge point is. And then you go almost all the way down to 93. You take a very long road that goes up to Twin Creek. Now, there's two Twin Creek trails. There's a Twin Creek Foot Trail, which is on the south. And then there's the Twin Creek Ridge Motorized Trail, which is north of that. And last year, there were several teams that got knackered because they accidentally got off on the foot trail, which you're probably not going to get a bike up that foot trail, not easily anyway. So you want to make sure you take the Twin Creek Ridge Motorized Trail, and I tried to place the waypoints in a manner that you won't get lost, but just be aware that other people have gotten lost there. The Twin Creek Ridge Trail is fantastic. It's one of the best trails you'll ever ride anywhere. It takes you up to the Continental Divide, and you're off to the races. You ride sort of north and east along the Divide Trail, and you end up at the ski area up there, Lost Pass. If you do the challenge section, you go back up Ditch Creek, and then you ride a section of the CDT that's actually got some gnarl in it. Not only is riding up Ditch Creek pretty interesting, but riding up that section of the CDT right after you get up there, there's a few pretty high energy switchbacks in there too. But either way, you'll end up at the Lost Trail ski area. You sort of ride around the ski hill, get back down, hit 93 at Lost Trail Pass, go across the road. Then you take Highway 43 out to almost Chief Joseph Pass. You don't quite get there. You're up real high, so it's like just a little bump in the road anyway. But just before you get to Chief Joseph Pass, there's a trail that goes off to the right, and it's a Jeep trail. And it takes you out along the Continental Divide again. You're going right along the Continental Divide. You go down to something called the Anderson Mountain Trail, and right when you get to the Anderson Mountain Trail, you'll hit the single track again, the CDT. Now, one thing about the CDT, especially in this area, you don't see it as much on the other side of the road, but there are an awful lot of hikers on this section of the CDT. Every place I've sent you, you have every right to be. But almost every hiker that comes up through there thinks you're on a non-motorized trail, and they're going to fuss at you. So, an anecdote. A couple of years ago, I was up there with some guys, and we were riding out the CDT there, just short of, what the heck's the name of that pass? Big Old Pass. And we're coming down through there. There's a spring there, and a lot of hikers, this spring is in all these route descriptions that they use when they're hiking the Continental Divide Trail. So they all hike up to this place and they come down to the spring. And we come bopping up through there and we see this guy. And the thing I remember is he looks like Jesus and he's wearing sandals. His hiking footwear consists of sandals. And he's got a staff. So I did what I always do. I stop, pull my bike off the side of the trail. And I'm way ahead of these other two guys that I'm with. So I start talking to him. I just, hey, I've got plenty of water here. I could save you a trip down to that spring if you want, because it's, it's a quarter of a mile down off the trail. I can save you a trip down the spring, give you some water if you want. And this guy picks up his hiking staff and starts shaking it at me going, "You're on a non-motorized trail. You have no right to be here." I thought he was going to hit me with it. And I just said, "I'm sorry, but you're wrong. This is a motorized trail, and I have every right to be here." And the conversation, shall we say, devolved from there. But about that time, my two buddies came riding up behind me, and he decided that he didn't like those odds, and he took off. But I think the guy, if it was just one of me, I think he was going to hit me in the head with that stick. So I've had encounters with hikers through there before, and it's kind of like that Little Boulder Creek Trail. When you run into hikers there, they're never happy to see you. They always assume you have no right to be there, and they're dead wrong. We don't send you down any illegal trails on the Tour of Idaho. So right as you hit the single track there is a bonus loop, and this is one that you want to do if you have a chance. It's a lot longer, but it's better than the trail that it replaces. You're going to like this bonus loop. You go down something, let me see if I can remember the name of this trail here. Let me pull it up. Oh, doggone it. I've forgotten the name of the trail, and I don't have the ride in front of me. I'm looking at the map. It goes down to the east of Anderson Mountain. There's a beautiful single track there that goes down, hits a Jeep road, goes down into the valley to Dalahanga Road, and then you go up something called 3 Mile Ridge. These are great trails. They're wonderful trails. They're easy. They're really scenic. It's fun riding. You're going to dig the heck out of these trails. And yeah, you're tripling your distance, but the trails are really fast. And that is a bonus section that, as long as time permits, I absolutely recommend that you do not ride past. That gets you back up onto the CDT, and it was right about waypoint, what's it look like? 68, where I ran into Jesus, and he tried to smite me with his staff. From there, you head south to Big Hole Pass, and there used to be you could ride single track all the way down into that area behind Sheep Creek. But a few years ago, the Continental Divide Trail wanders between Idaho and Montana, and every place it wandered into Montana, they closed it. So there's a quarter of a mile of trail into Montana, and we can't ride it because it's closed. I'm going to go up and fix that with a saw myself one of these days. But right now, there's nothing we can do. So you got to go down that road. You come down past Morgan Mountain. You're going to head up coming down what is it, Lick Creek. So you come down to the Lick Creek watershed, you get almost to the bottom, you get to the Powder Gulch Trail. Powder Gulch is a trail that has been reclaimed. It kind of had fallen into disuse, and nobody had ridden it for a while. And I and others went up a few years ago and made a project out of reclaiming the trail. It's a nice trail. It's hard to find your way in a couple of spots, but it's been ridden enough. The last time I was up there last summer, a lot of people have ridden it, and there's a pretty good tire tread that goes up there now. I put a lot of waypoints there, and if you get lost, just roll from one waypoint to the next. But make sure you go to those waypoints in the correct order. There was a team that got hosed a couple years ago, and they actually had to call search and rescue because they tried to do those waypoints out of order, and they ended up in a brushy side hill, and down looked like a direction they didn't want to go in, and they couldn't get back up it. So they ended up getting kind of knackered. Don't let that happen to you. Some of the side hills there are clear. They don't have any brush on them. But where they do, that area has been heavily logged, so the underbrush is really thick. And if you get on some of those side hills that are brushy, you're never getting your bike through some of that stuff. So you got to be careful. It's even sometimes difficult to find the trail when you're right on it because it's so overgrown in a couple of spots. The write-up talks about places you need to pay attention to when you're coming down the other side into Sheep Creek. The trail doesn't go all the way down into Sheep Creek. You have to turn left about 2/3 of the way down. There's a waypoint that you'll notice up off to your left that'll take you where you want to go. So you're going to get down to Sheep Creek, and this year we're going to do things a little bit different. Once you get down into Sheep Creek, you're going to turn to the right. You're going to head back to the west instead of going to the east like we did last year. So instead of going up around Eagle Mountain, you're going to head down to Silver Leads Road and ride up Silver Leads Road, and that'll take you to the Silver Leads / Stein Mountain Trail. And you're going to dig the heck out of this. Now, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going uphill. First year, I had people go up it. Last couple years, I had people go down it. But up it is better. It's good trail tread. It's on solid rock, but it's incredibly steep. At one point, you climb over 1,000 feet in something like a mile and a half. It's just incredible how steep this trail is. And you're up there, and your motor's hot, and you're on this fully loaded bike. And so I usually stop a couple of times up there to let my motor cool down because you'll boil out your coolant if you don't. And you got to hang on to those brakes pretty hard where you stop, or put your bike sideways or something because it's so steep. If your bike starts tumbling backwards, you're going to have to run down that hill a long way to get your bike. And when you get up that lookout, the people up there they're agape that you rode up that trail. They say, yeah, we see people go down it, but we never see anybody come up it. But it's a good trail, and it's actually easier to find the trail when you're going up than it is when you're going down. Again, try not to spin your tire going up that trail, even though the trail tread is pretty good and you don't need to do it. Just don't ride like a knucklehead because trails like that are fragile, and it wouldn't take too much knuckleheaded riding to kind of really trash this trail. You get to the top, Stein Mountain. There's a lookout up there, big, nice one, challenge point. You're going to take a Jeep trail around, and you're going to come back over to the CDT. And let's see, where is it? I think it's about 9DXYZ 105 is where you hit the CDT again. It's right down in there somewhere. South Fork of Sheep Creek. This year, there's a cabin down in there that's kind of cool. There's an old cabin in the middle of nowhere, and you can go into it. It's got an old iron stove and everything. That cabin is a challenge point down in Sheep Creek. Then you come back up. You go around the Sheep Creek side hill around Eagle Mountain, which many of you will find scintillating. I ran into a bear riding that trail once, and came roaring through there, and I could see the bear prints. I knew that a bear had been down the trail. I didn't know that the bear had been down the trail like 5 minutes in front of me. And you come around through there, and there's a little cliffy section. That bear was sitting right there in the shade. I couldn't believe it, but he removed himself on his own recognizance and ran down into Sheep Creek. So you're going to come back out. You'll come around. I like doing this trail better in this direction anyway. You're going to come back down to Sheep Creek. You will retrace your tracks for about a mile because you'll come past the exit of Powder Creek again. You are going to head out to 93 and you're going to go back to North Fork. It'll be a full day. I don't think anybody is going to do this in 90 minutes. I think it'll be a fairly full day. There's a ton of single track. Mostly it's nice. There's a little beater hill, a rocky little hill on Sheep Creek, but this year you're going down it instead of up it. And I think that everybody's really going to dig the heck out of this day. If you get going early, I don't think there should be any problem with getting back by 6, 7 o'clock at night. So you should get back in plenty of time for a good meal, good night's rest. You're going to need it because the next day is a huckleberry. So let's pull up day 10 here. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Here we go. There we go. All right, day 10. Day 10 takes you from North Fork to either Elk City or Lowell. Now, as I mentioned in the write-up, I don't care whether you go to Elk City or Lowell. It's 6 one, half dozen of the other. Elk City is kind of a cool place. I prefer to stay there. The Wi-Fi is better in Elk City. The post office has Wi-Fi there, so you can sit on the veranda outside the post office, and it's pretty fast. At least it was the last time I was there. If you go to the Three Rivers or the Wilderness Inn in Lowell, the Wi-Fi sucks. They don't have any. They didn't have any at the Wilderness Inn the last time I was there. And the Three Rivers had it, but it was slow and data restricted, so it kind of sucks. You're in a blackout if you go there. The advantage is it makes the next day much shorter. And the next day is long. But it doesn't matter to me whether you go to Elk City or Lowell. I've done 6 tours, and I've stayed 3 times in Elk City and 3 times in Lowell. And, you know, it's really just up to you. Probably if I were doing it this year, I might consider staying in Elk City. You have to go to Elk City. We used to not go, for a few years, we didn't even go to Elk City anymore. We just went straight to Lowell. And that's when people started staying in Lowell. But there's no gas available anymore at Lowell. Cougar Station closed. As far as I know, it has not reopened. Please don't ask the people at either hotel there if you could buy gas from them. They don't want to have anything to do with that. That's not their gig. So you have to get gas in Elk City, or you have to go down to Kuski to get gas. One of those two places. It's a violation of tour rules if you do anything else. I want the lay of the land to be fair to everybody. So the way we've done it the last couple of years is just said, look, you got to gas up in Elk City. Hey, you got to carry what you're going to need to get you into Lowell and through the next day. What I recommend that you do is fill up every fuel bladder that you bought, your giant loop gas bags, fill up your bike, and then buy a 2.5 gallon can and strap it to your bike somehow, because most of the trails coming out of Elk City and going down to Lowell are easy enough that, you know, you can carry an extra 2.5 gallons of gas and you're going to be fine. But unless you got a 7-gallon tank on your bike, and I had that once, you're going to be sweating it getting all the way to Superior, which is the next place for gas. Can't get any at Lowell, and it's real problematic. You can beg and borrow gas at some of the campgrounds along the way, but that's it. There's no gas stations. So let's talk about let's just assume we're going to go to Elk City first, then we'll talk about the Lowell part of it separately. The first thing that you're going to do on this day is you're going to head back down the Salmon River Road once again, except this time, instead of going up Sage Creek, which you did the day before, you're going to go up Indian Creek this time. And you go way up to the top of Indian Creek, and you go through a meadow there, and hello, Brent. You go through a meadow, and it looks like that road dead ends in a creek, depending on what the trail crew has done that's gone through there, because there's a bunch of willows, and it just doesn't look like it comes out of the other side of the creek, but it does. I recommend that you push across that creek, by the way, because it's a long way, but in the willows on the other side, that trail picks up, and it's actually a quad trail, believe it or not. You go down, it goes down the edge of the creek, it crosses another little creek down there, and after it crosses that second creek, you actually go up the creek for about 50 yards. That's another place where I would push if I were you, because there's some holes in there, and if you're on your bike and you go into one of those holes, you're likely to dump it and fill the intake full of water. So you get up, and after a while, you get onto a nicer quad trail, and it zigzags through some switchbacks. Then you hit this Henderson Ridge single-track trail. It's steep, goes right up to the Continental Divide. It's a nice trail, but early in the season, it's hard to find your way because there'll be a lot of down timber through there. There's some guys that live in that area that generally saw that stuff out pretty early. We'll have to see how that goes this year. But you get back up to the CDT, and there is actually a solo variant that leaves the CDT at a place called Irishman's Rock. You can just ride down to Painted Rocks Reservoir by a much quicker route. Soloists have a real difficult time carrying as much fuel, so we give them a shorter day. Everybody else rides along the CDT all the way over to Blue Nose Lookout. Now, there's a challenge section in this area, and it's Marlin Springs. The last time I rode this was about 4 years ago, and it was an epic trail. At that time, we rate Tour of Idaho trails on a scale that goes 1 to 5. They're normalized to the Tour of Idaho. So 1 is the easiest type of trail you will find on the Tour of Idaho. A 5 is the hardest type of trail you will find along the Tour of Idaho. Doesn't mean 1's the easiest anywhere. 5's the hardest anywhere. It's normalized to the Tour of Idaho. This challenge section was an absolute 5 the last time I rode it. I understand a trail crew's gone in there. I don't know if they rerouted it or not. If they just cut it, it's still a 5 because there's the Erzberg Mile that you still have to go through, these great big huge boulders that you got to ride over and around that are in this buckgrass, and you can't see them. You're just like riding along, and all of a sudden your bike just disappears off the edge of a boulder. That's still there unless they did a reroute. I'll know a little later this summer because I'll go up and check it out. Then after that, it was like just this really meandering path through all this deadfall. It was horrible. But again, a trail crew's been in there. This particular trail crew is known to reroute around things like that. So it could be that they've bypassed some of that stuff. I just don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But that challenge section's a huckleberry. I don't recommend it, even if they have rerouted it in a manner that makes it a lot easier than it used to be. It's long, and it's on a day where you're already pressed for time and you're already pressed for fuel. Oh, and by the way, once you leave North Fork and you get up to the CDT and start rolling to the west, you're in a different time zone. You're in the Pacific time zone for the rest of the tour. So bear that in mind. You gain an hour that way. So you're going to end up at Blue Nose Lookout if you're on a 2 and 3 person team. All of the routes reunite near a place called Alta. And you're going to leave the road. There's a paved road there. You leave it. You go around Painted Rocks Reservoir. Takes you up and around to the Darby Elk City Road, Darby, Montana Elk City Road. Also known, part of it's known as the Magruder Road. It's the only way across the wilderness area. There's a motorized corridor that's about 80 feet wide through there, and it goes all through the Frank Church Wilderness area. Magruder Road is what it is. I mean, the first time across it, it's kind of cool. Gets up on some high ridges. It used to be a lot cooler than it is now because now it's all burned up. These wilderness areas, you're not allowed to use mechanical means to fight fires. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. So fires just burn back in there. And I haven't been there in a couple of years, but the last time I was in there 2 or 3 years ago, the whole area was a burned out wasteland. Go figure. But anyway, there's still sections of it that are kind of cool. You will. There's a couple of challenge points out there. One of them's optional. There's a hike out to Salmon Mountain Lookout that's slightly less than a mile one way. If you want to get that one, you got to walk. And then there's another lookout, Burnt Knob, that you can ride to. Challenge point there. You come down into Poet Creek. You ride a long way around to a place called, let me get it up my map here, Mountain Meadows. On Mountain Meadows, you take a series of quad trails that are actually kind of cool. Again, they go through a burned out area, but you take a series of quad trails that'll take you down to the Red River Hot Springs Road. Once you hit that road down there, Red River Hot Springs is only about a mile up the road. If you're thirsty or you're hungry, you can go up there and get something to drink, something to eat. They don't have any fuel there, though, so it won't help you out that way. But it is kind of a nice place. They got a swimming pool there. A lot of people go back and spend a few days there. It's a cool place, but as close as you are to Elk City, I would head on into Elk City. You're going to go up past the Alberta mine and take a series of Jeep trails and ATV trails, which will eventually take you into Elk City. And again, even though I show you how to bypass Elk City, without fuel in Lowell, you got to go into Elk City. It's the only way. I used to have several different routes in and out of Elk City. This year, what I did was I gave you one bonus, a short one if you want to get a bonus coming back out. But the way in is a way that I know is good and it's easy to find, so I would just take that. Get into Elk City. There's a nice general store there. There's a couple stores there, but one of them is really nice. There's a hotel there. There used to be a steakhouse. I don't know if it's still operating, but it's a pretty happening little place. If you're staying there, you're done for the day. Most of you will probably decide to go to Lowell because you'll get there kind of early. If you're going to go to Lowell, again, put as much fuel on your bike as you can. Buy a couple of gas cans at that store there. Fill them up with gas. You can leave them on a picnic table at a campground somewhere, and somebody will think it's swag. You won't be polluting the earth or anything like that. Somebody will be grateful that they found it. But once you leave Elk City, whether it's the same day or the next morning, you ride back out to Anderson Butte. There is a bonus section that'll take you there. Cool little trail. It's the it's the Anderson Butte Recreational Trail. Then you take a series of ATV trails and dirt roads to a place called Falls Point. Now, if you're looking at the map, you'll notice there are a whole lot of alternative routes through there in purple. That's because I've been doing the tour now for 17 years. Every year, except for one, out of the last 17 years, part of that area's been closed either for fire or logging or road construction or something. If that's the case, we give you plenty of routes. Any of them will work. If the road down Falls Point is closed for any reason, any of those purple routes will take you to Lowell. Pick which one you want. Some are longer than others, but just pick the one that you want and go. The best way, though, is down Falls Point. It's really pretty going down that hill. It's a long way down that hill. It's steep and it's kind of impressive. You'll hit the Selway River Road down there, which is kind of cool, and then it's a long drone about 20 miles into Lowell, which is the lowest elevation of the tour at 1,400 feet. Again, Lowell, as of last year, didn't have a gas station. I haven't heard anything about Cougar Station reopening. There's two places to stay there, the Wilderness Inn and the Three Rivers, and 6 in one, half dozen the other. They're both great places. The restaurant at the Wilderness Inn is pretty good. They have excellent pancakes there. Now, we've got just a few minutes left, and I'll take some questions at the end of this, but I want to talk just a little bit about the next day, which is day 11. Let me get that map up here. We'll talk more about day 11 next week. We'll start with that, but if you pull up that day 11 map, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. There are a bazillion trails in this day 11 area, and I've ridden almost all of them, and they're all really good. Some of them I haven't ridden recently, but I really like these trails. They're great trails. They're not high in elevation like some of the stuff further south, but they're still cool trails. A lot of them are really easy, and they're kind of fast single tracks where you can be in third and fourth gear just busting it through these areas. But the trees are pretty dense. Undergrowth is frequently a problem. If you get there on a rainy day or a cold day, you might freeze to death. The coldest I have ever been is on the current day 11 of the tour. Riding through there once when it was raining and then it turned to snow, and Gore-Tex does you no good in those circumstances. You're riding through, all those wet tree limbs are smacking your arms and your legs, And that Gore-Tex, once you start getting just strike after strike on Gore-Tex, it'll wick moisture right through. That's where you need absolute waterproof gear in conditions like that. So you need, an absolute waterproof rain jacket. That's why I carry plastic bags. I carry rain gear like that, but also plastic bags just as a backup. But this area is cool. And there are a bazillion trails in there. And one thing I've been wanting to do is just say, why don't we just let you figure out which way you want to go through there? There's all kinds of great trails. I'll describe the trails, and then you can figure out, you can put together your own route through there. And if you look, everybody's got to go up to the first lookout, which is Waldy Lookout. Then you're all going to go up to a place called Canyon Junction, just north of that. Then after that, you can go whatever way you want. Soloists don't have to claim as many of those trails as 2-member teams, and then 2-member teams don't have to claim as many as 3-member teams. So the larger your team size, the more of those trails you're going to have to ride. Also, there's a bunch of challenge points in there. I put challenge points everywhere, and I put them in places to kind of encourage you to ride certain trails, I guess. Some of my favorites, but they're all over the place. And again, soloists don't need as many as 2-person teams, who don't need as many as 3-person teams. But you get to plot your own route there. And this is the only day it doesn't matter which way you ride those trails. So you could do a loop clockwise, counterclockwise. You can ride a trail up, down. You can do a trails and out and back if you want to, as long as you do the whole thing. Now, one thing that I mentioned in the write-up is that the only caveat is that in order to claim a trail, you have to ride all of it. So you can't just ride a little chunk of the trail out to a challenge point and then turn around and ride back out and say I did the whole trail. No, if it's in the middle of a trail, you got to ride the whole trail. And to claim a challenge point, some of these challenge points are located in places where you could actually kind of ride up a dirt road if you wanted to and then just go a little way down a trail and get the challenge point. You're not going to do that. If it's on a route where there's a single track trail that goes through there, you have to ride that single track. So I'll give you the same, for instance, that I did in the write-up. Castle Butte, Castle Creek Lookout, there's nothing but dirt road that leads to that. That's one that it's just a cool place. I just want you to go there. If you're on the Lolo motorway, just take the Dewar out there. So no single tracks required to claim that one. But just a little bit to the west and the south of that is the Fish Butte challenge point, which is up at the Fish Butte Lookout. There's a helipad up there. You're not going to be able to claim that if you just ride out that Middle Butte Road and then ride up there and get it and then turn around and ride back. No, you got to do one of those single track loops in that area. You have to do Fish Butte, Fish Creek, Ant Hill, something like that to claim that challenge point. And if there's any question about it, you can just ask me and I'll render an opinion. But for the most part, there are a few that clearly there's no single track to get to it. It just kind of is where it is. And those you're welcome to just claim. I think there's 2 or 3 that are like that. But the rest of them, if there's single track, Scurvy Mountain, for instance, the Scurvy Lookout, I expect you to ride one of those single track trails in that area if you're going to claim them. But again, you can ride these trails in any direction. You can do them as an out and back. You can do loops clockwise or counterclockwise. You can put it together any way you want. And as long as you meet the minimum number of trails and the minimum number of challenge points, that's it. And I looked at each of them when I considered solo 2- and 3-member teams. I had a way, when I looked at it, I said, this is the way I would do it if it were me. And it made sense, and it's not incredibly difficult to do what you need to do. You have to be clever in a couple cases, but it's not very difficult. No challenge section that day because why? There's just ride the trails. They're all great. So I think you'll have quite a bit of fun on that day. And what I'm going to do next week is talk about the trails individually and tell you what I think about each of them. Some of those trails in there are boogers. Now, there's a few of them. Pot Mountain, that area. You might want to think a little bit before you go up into there. But most of the rest of that stuff is not too bad. Jake Hershey, Ant Hill to Fish Butte, then back down out at Fish Creek. Riding down Ant Hill's not too bad. that's something I would do. Going down, it's not a problem. Going up it, it's a booger. But yeah, you could do that. You can do it any way you want to do. I just, to me, that's fun. You have an entire palette out there of colors. You paint what you want on that canvas. Ride any trail you want. Now, it's a long day, and all the trails converge up around a place called the Cedars. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week. The Cedars is an interesting place because people that drive really big fifth-wheel trailers like I drive or drive those big Class A motorhomes, they like to go to the Cedars. So when you roll into the Cedars, there's always a bunch of really big rigs there with UTVs, ATVs, motorcycles parked outside. I have never one time in my life gone to the Cedars and not been able to buy gas. You know, you just walk up there, and there's always going to be people sitting around the campfire, drinking beers, eating food. The only thing is you usually have to eat a hamburger. They'll give you the gas, but you got to eat the hamburger that goes with it. People there treat you really well. And a lot of them know what you're doing, too. You say, yeah, I'm on the tour of Idaho. They go, yeah, I heard of that. And that's the place I would go looking for gas if I were out. Another place is the Kelly Forks work area. You can generally find somebody around there that can hook you up with some gas. There's little campgrounds all through there. And next week, we'll talk a little bit more about some places you might be able to find some fuel. Now, we're coming up on time this week. And so what I will do is answer questions if you have any about what we did today. If there aren't any, I'll see you next week, and we'll go through the rest of the tour. We'll be able to get you all the way to Wallace, I think, next week. That'll get us well into June. And what I'll do is I'm going to spend a couple of these PBR Mondays just talking about challenge point rules. We'll go back over some things in terms of equipment and navigation. And then once tour season arrives, we won't do any more PBR Mondays. I'll just do a daily update like I've done the last couple of seasons. Once people start to finish, if teams finish, we'll do a PBR Monday where I interview that team. Then when fall comes around, that's my big-time riding season, and so I will be unavailable for several weeks in September and October because I'll be out riding. And we'll do a hot stove league and get the rest of the teams in before Christmas and then on to the next year. So that's kind of looking into the future. So if you got any questions, now's a good time to ask because in about 30 seconds I'm going to be saying bye-bye if I don't see anything. There's a lot of you out there tonight, which is good. All right, well, seeing nothing. Uh-oh, wait a minute. How can we verify we are, hold on. How can we verify we are on the calendar before June 1st? Is the calendar public? Yeah, it is, and there's a link to it, and all you got to do is go to the forum, and you should be able to access that link in the beginning. Now, I haven't updated the calendar recently. What I'm going to do is I looked for a long time. There wasn't any activity in it, and I'm not going to look until June 1st. On June 1st, I will look at the calendar, and I will look at that thread in the forum, and anybody that's registered by June 1st, I'll go ahead and put them on the calendar. So I'll check one last time on June 1st, and as long as you have done everything that you need to do, I'll put you on the calendar. If you haven't, I will send you an email and say you need to do this. Then I'll put you on the calendar. So as long as you make an attempt to get on the calendar on or before June 1st, you're golden this year. And last time I checked, we still have 8 spots left or something like that. Let's see. Mike, what about the E-route into Elk City? I don't have that up on my thing right now. Let me look at that sometime. Hold on here. Let me see if I can find it. Now, I don't have the copy of... I think the E-route that you're talking about, is that a purple route? I think that's just in case there's a fire that closes a bunch of stuff. I think that's why that's on there. So let's see. Brian, average travel time from Elk City to Lowell on the normal route, about 90 minutes. Doesn't take that long. Jim Spooner got out this weekend to start checking day 12. It's going to be good. Yeah, I suspect it is. Just the parts that I know about are awesome. So the stuff that I've already ridden is pretty cool, and the stuff that you guys are going to add to it is just going to make it golden. Finally, Drew, I know that this is back a couple days, but the day from Smoky Bar to Stammen is broken into 2 days. Can we confirm that? Yeah, it is 2 days. It's you go to, there's Chalice in the middle of all that. Turning PLB tracking off. Is it acceptable to change the map URL to not? Nope, I want it turned off. I don't want any mistakes because I'll have to DQ you if you make a mistake. So what you're going to do is turn it off, and when we get into the nuts and bolts of that, I have a way that you could still have somebody watching you, which is going to be me and a few other guys. You're going to PM us through your PLB when you get to certain spots. So there'll still be a way that we can watch you, but I don't want anybody to make a mistake. So we kind of went through that. The fellas I talked to about what we should do about this, and we all figured the safest thing is just to turn it off. That way there's no chance in the world that you give away, because if your PLB broadcasts in some of these mystery areas, you're out of the Tour of Idaho. I'm going to DQ you in a heartbeat, and I won't give you any of the rest of it. The mystery route part of this is really an essential element of the tour going forward. And I'm going to switch it up again next year so that that way, if it does leak out from the teams that came through this year, the teams that come next year still get to experience this. But Jake, there will be a way. I and a few others are going to be monitoring you, and we will give you a way. There's a way you could send out your location to your PLB to just designated individuals. You can put together a list, and that's the way we're going to handle that. That way, if something happens to you, we'll know approximately where you're at, and we'll be able to help you out. All right, it's 8 o'clock. Once again, you've wasted another perfectly good hour with a knucklehead like me. I have no idea why you guys do this. So we spend the night in Chalice. I was told we will not stay during the Braun Brothers reunion. Yeah, Drew, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it says that right on the website. You can't stay there during the Braun Brothers reunion because there is no place to stay. So if you booked your tour and you're in Chalice during the Braun Brothers, you're sleeping on the ground somewhere because there is no place to stay. I don't think you'll be able to get an Airbnb or anything else. That people book rooms there a year in advance. So you're either going to be sleeping on the ground that night somewhere, or you should change your tour. Last year, I allowed some guys to stay at Sawmill Station. I'm not going to let anybody. I told everybody this year you're not going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to stick to that. All right. Anyway, I will see you all next week. Look at the stuff. I'll get those threads up, and I'll be seeing you. Cheers.